S.T.A.L.K.E.R Call of Pripyat is a sequel to 2007's Shadow of Chernobyl and follows Major S.T.A.L.K.E.R as he's sent into the zone to find out what happened to a squad of helicopters that all crashed. Atmosphere. As a return to form, S.T.A.L.K.E.R Call of Pripyat lures the player in from the very beginning, with its opening area of Zaton being melancholic and bleak, a large swampy area where it rains frequently and the music that seeps in can only be described as atmospheric. Thanks to the frequent emissions and weather effects, this version of the zone feels more alive than others. With stalker groups walking freely and camping out in the wild, it seems more natural and probably has the most immersive game world of the original trilogy. Call of Pripyat has a much lower focus on combat for quite a large portion of the game, and exploring its various environments is incredibly lonely. It's this loneliness that's reinforced time and time again, more so than the other games, and even though this installment invokes the most camaraderie with other stalkers, there's a deep isolation in its gameplay. Most of the buildings are either empty or full of zombified stalkers. It's strange that the zone can be so alive but feels so dead at the same time.
The bodies we found before didn't have those.
When the sun goes down, the small cone of light that your flashlight emits is all that illuminates the darkness in the wild, where mutants can creep up on you or appear out of nowhere. But the best thing about the game is that everything can come together organically, like a thunderstorm as you explore a creepy military base, and the music starts to ramp up as you go deeper into the unknown. There are only a few moments in the game where the atmosphere moved out of its moody isolation into pure dread, and it was done organically. The time of day you visit certain location can make a world of difference. My nighttime exploration on this boat looking for an artifact had me so on edge that simply seeing another human being when I wasn't expecting to scared me so much I almost shot him. As for the tunnel to Pripyat, some of that was nerve-wracking but not as bad as the X-Labs in Shadow of Chernobyl. This game isn't as intense, but its atmosphere is undeniable. That's one Harry Mason.
Shh! It's full of sleeping bloodsuckers. Let's try to get by them without making any noise.
Scares. Call of Pripyat returns a lot of enemies missing from Clear Sky and even adds some new ones, but it often felt like a missed opportunity with the locations you found enemies in. The poltergeists, which incited a ton of fear in the darkened tunnels of the X-Labs in the Shadow of Chernobyl, were freely roaming an open compound in broad daylight, making them very easy to see and avoid. The game does a lot better with scripted events and side missions than previous games, and some have really intense moments, like crawling through a room full of bloodsuckers, which was totally nerve-wracking. The gunplay is still fast and frantic, with excursions being over in a few seconds for you if you make a mistake, but I often found there weren't as many occasions where the enemy snuck up on me or came out of nowhere. It still misses the more frightening twitch combat of Shadow of Chernobyl. The enemy AI doesn't move as quietly, and whilst there were some surprises in the game and some downright frightening moments, the majority of the nerve-wracking dread that came from exploring enemy-filled locations rich with anomalies and radiations, it just isn't as deadly as it used to be. Whilst the anomalies can still rip you to pieces and can be pretty intense, they mainly repeat the same ones, which are pretty easy to avoid with bolts. The emissions are still a horrifying and unnatural force of nature that loom in the distance until they tear through the area, and getting caught outside is by far one of the most terrifying experiences in the game. It's such a strange and foreboding feeling you get when someone on the radio announces an emission is heading your way. Whilst the game does a lot of things very well, it seems the biggest mistake it had was reducing the amount of combat, as it seems to have toned down a lot of the fear. Call of Pripyat is still very good, just it doesn't have the same qualities to it that the original had. That's still one Harry Mason. Sound design. There's a new selection of tracks on offer for this installment, and they're all really dark and moody, full of sadness but also discordant despair and metallic supernatural sounds infused with ghostly radio voices and steeped in reverb. Some of it is almost unearthly. They give the game a melancholic feel, and it really works with a post-apocalyptic look to the environments. Old industrial complexes that have wasted away, giant tears in the landscape forged by anomalies. When you pair this with the music, it's just some of the best things in the series. S.T.A.L.K.E.R's sound effects are mostly stock or things used from the last few games. The same pained mutant howls coming out of the darkness and the swamp-like crickets and chirping and other sound effects help build the atmosphere a lot. The voice acting feels pretty wooden, but it always has. The same lines repeat a lot and some of the accents can be kind of funny. The directional audio is spot on with things travelling around you precisely as you turn, which is really impressive. A lot of the stock effects and some of the moans are disappointingly static though, so no matter where you're looking it sounds as if they're coming to your left or right, which spoils the illusion. Whilst it uses a lot of stock effects, it all comes together nicely with a deeply moody soundtrack and some impressive audio. That's 2 Harry Masons. Gore. Once again, the game doesn't contain a great deal of blood, with most of what's generated coming from shootouts, and whilst that's realistic for the kind of gunplay at hand, personally, I'd love to see more gory deaths portrayed in S.T.A.L.K.E.R, because it just makes sense that there would be. Stalkers are said to be torn to pieces by anomalies and mutants alike when they aren't gunning each other down or blowing each other up, and this is certainly true for how often the player can die during the game, but the bodies you find in the world just feel so lackluster for the level of hostile the zone is depicted to be. But I digress. Whilst what's presented is fine, I always feel as though there should be more. That's 3 Harry Masons. Story. This installment is set after the first game, Shadow of Chernobyl, and follows Major Degtyarev as he infiltrates the zone to find out what happened to several helicopters that were sent in to recon the area during the finale of Shadow of Chernobyl. The story is mostly chasing down the survivors of the helicopter crashes, but it's split between the large amounts of time you spend travelling, and it's once again easy to forget what you're doing thanks to all the enticing exploration and side missions. The quality of the side missions, as mentioned earlier, they're all written far better, and even simple things like getting swindled by an NPC does wonders to the immersion of the game. It's very easy to lose yourself going after anomalies or gear or chasing down legends and ghosts mentioned by other stalkers. The main story isn't hugely interesting and it's easy to forget about it whilst you explore the most accessible version of the zone so far. It has its high points like making friends with some people who will go on a near suicide mission with you to Pripyat, but it's still too easy to get distracted. The story is just enough to give you a reason to explore its world, meet the stalkers and see what the zone has to offer, and as sad and as cliche as it is to say, it's mostly about the friends you make along the way. Making the final score 4 out of 5 Harry Masons. The star of S.T.A.L.K.E.R is the zone and its characters. The landscape is bleak, hostile, and unwelcoming, but to many, it's home. Again, I'd like to remind you this whole thing is down to my opinion in horror games, and if you don't share this opinion, then that's cool, I get it. I'd like to point out that whilst I was liquefied by an emission, I did not scream like a banshee or run away from the computer. I advise you don't either. There'll be more horror reviews in the pipeline, and thanks for watching. Always go check out Bumps in the middle of the night. Peace.